Now, let's go ahead and go through in terms of what you can do in terms of therapy or the mental health profession with what you got. With just a high school diploma, there are some things that you might be able to do. What's up, fam? Welcome back to the channel. My name is Phil Sarpong. This is Phil's Guide to PsyD. This channel is dedicated to all things psychology, wellness, and graduate school. As we've mentioned before several times on this channel, there's a lot of different ways to become a therapist, whether it's with a bachelor's degree, a master's degree, or even a doctorate degree in clinical psychology. There's various different types of therapists and counselors in the United States, and so there's a lot of different ways to get to the end goal. And so in this video, we're gonna go over the specific ways of how to get there. All right, now before we continue, I do want to let you all know something I came across a few months ago. If you're in grad school or in college, you know that the grind is real. And lately, I've actually been including something in my daily routine that has helped boost my productivity, and it's called Magic Mind. So I will give you all my honest review. I was a little skeptical of Magic Mind. I had heard of it in other social media platforms, but I decided to give it a try, and I was actually very surprised. I think by day 3, I started to feel certain effects. And at first I thought it was like a placebo, like, you know, you drink it and you're like, oh, now I'm amazing, now I'm super alert. I think it was more subtle than that, but I will say by day 4 and day 5, I did start to feel something. And I noticed that I was taking smaller amounts of my caffeine, and so usually I might do 1 to 2 cups a day, but I noticed that with Magic Mind I only needed like half a cup to 1 cup, and it was kind of interesting. It was kind of like I just stayed alert throughout the day. One of the reasons why Magic Mind works pretty well is that it actually uses a blend of nootropics, which are powerful ingredients that support your cognitive levels, your energy levels, and it's in this little 2-ounce shot that you take. If you're looking to try it, there's a 60-day money-back guarantee. All right, guys, so we'll start from the bottom and we'll work all the way to the top. As you guys can see, there's a lot of different degrees and certifications that you guys can get, whether with a couple of years of school, a 4-year college degree, or even more. You can get doctorate degrees in social work, psychology, and in marriage and family therapy. If you get doctoral degrees in these 3 areas, you will definitely be able to do therapy with patients. You'll also probably be able to do some research and probably some teaching as well. If you get some degrees and certifications in this area, whether it's in a 2-year associate degree or a bachelor's degree, you may not be able to do therapy, but you may be able to get some certifications that can specifically help you to work with specific populations. And I'll go over that a little bit more in the video. All right, so let's go over to this section. We're going to talk about some of the letters and what they mean. When you guys see letters like LCSW, that is a licensed clinical social worker. When you see something like licensed professional clinical counselor or LPCC, that is what that means. An LMFT is a licensed marriage and family therapist. An LEP is a licensed educational psychologist. And in California, you can become a licensed psychologist as well as a licensed psychiatrist if you go through med school. So that's in general what some of the letters mean. Now let's go ahead and go through in terms of what you can do in terms of the therapy or the mental health profession with what you got. With just a high school diploma, there are some things that you might be able to do. I would say though, at this stage, it's really important to try and figure out exactly what you want to do. In fact, with a certification program along with a high school diploma, a lot of people can actually become an alcohol and drug counselor, an autism technician, a community health worker, human services certificate, mental health worker, peer support specialist, psychiatric technician, and a registered behavior technician. Now, I'll let you guys do your own specific research on what piques your interest in terms of this specific list. All I'm going to say is that none of these can specifically do therapy. Most of these are either testing related options for work. You might be working with a physician or a psychologist or a therapist. None of these positions specifically allow you to do therapy with any individual or any diagnosing whatsoever. So these are more so helper positions that you can do. Now, what I will say about these certificate programs, these do look really good on a CV. So if you're applying to a master's program, if you're applying to a doctorate program and you have alcohol and drug counselor in your resume or in your CV, that is going to look really good. Any type of certifications that you guys can get in this area is going to look really phenomenal. It's going to give you a lot of experience, especially as you go into college, especially if you go into graduate school. With a high school diploma, I would potentially look into getting a certification so that you guys may be able to do more work in the mental health profession and become really competitive applicants when you apply to grad school. All right, so what can you do with an associate's degree? So after you go through high school, maybe you get a certification, maybe you don't. I mean, this is optional. Let's say you do go into college and you get your associates. Now, if you get your associates, there's a couple things that you can do. You can work in addiction studies, so you can probably do some research there. You can also work in human services, maybe in an HR department. You can work in a psychology department, a sociology department, or a social behavioral sciences department. So these could be university positions. These also could be companies that have specific spots for this as well. There's a lot of organizations that are now having more neuroscience departments or psychology departments. So that is one of the things that you guys can do as well with an associate's. I will mention again, any type of thing that you are trying to do with an associate's is not going to allow you to do therapy with a client. You most likely won't be able to teach or necessarily do research independently, but you'll be able to probably help alongside other therapists or mental health professionals along the way. Once again, this is going to look really good for the resume. If you go through a certification, you get your associates and you wait for a while, maybe you work in the field for a long time before getting your bachelor's degree, I think this is also going to put you in a really good position for grad school. Finally, let's say you get your bachelor's degree and you get your bachelor's degree in 3 related fields. Now, the most common majors that go on to graduate school for psychology or therapy related work is going to be social work, psychology, or sociology. I would also add in neuroscience for those who want to become neuropsychologists, but that is basically what your bachelor's degree is going to be. If you want to major in other things, feel free to. A lot of programs really don't care that much what you major in as long as you fulfill all of the prerequisite classes that they ask you in order to apply. And so if one of these 3 things interests you, this is going to prepare you really well for grad school. All right, so just a little bit of a recap. With a high school diploma or a GED, you guys can go into perhaps the potential of looking into what you want to do for therapy or a psychology related field. The certifications are probably going to be your best bet because not only can you get paid and have a salary, but you don't need a ton of education to get these certifications. You can work alongside other clinicians and therapists and psychologists and really build up your resume and CV. Once you go into the associates and the bachelor's degree, you are now set up really well to get a master's degree or a PhD in some type of mental health related field. All right, so now let's go into getting a master's. There's 4 different things that you guys can do when it comes to getting a master's. A lot of people will get a master's of social work. Some people will get a master's of school psychology. You can also get an MA, an MS, or an MFT in something related to counseling, clinical counseling, or clinical psychology. And then you can also get a master's or a master's in science in counseling psychology or clinical psychology. Now, here is what I will say with these 4 different things. It's going to depend on the state. Most likely, after you get your master's of social work or counseling or whatever it is, you most likely are going to have to take a licensure exam, right? So in order to work independently as a social worker and do therapy with patients, you're gonna have to take a licensure exam and probably have to do a 1-year internship just to get the hours, the supervision hours that you might need in order to become independent. Same with school psychology, same with counseling, clinical and clinical psychology, as well as the master's here with counseling psychology and clinical psychology. All of these 4 related fields, you'll have to get some type of certification right after that. Maybe go through a 1-year internship just to fulfill the supervision hours in order to work independently. So that's just so you know. So a master's of social work, if you get a licensure, if you go through the licensure exam, you'll be independent. Same actually for school psychology. You don't need a doctorate in school psychology to work independently. You are going to have to check in specific states because that may not be the full case among all the states. But for the most part, if you just have a master's in school psychology, you probably will be able to get a certification right after this and then also work independently. All right, guys, we are finally getting to the end. All right, so after you have your supervision experience on this category, you can then take your licensure exam and become a licensed clinical social worker. On this area, same thing, you can become a licensed educational psychologist. Now, here's what I'll say about school psychology is that school psychology are only going to be able to focus in on school psychology. That's why it's a little bit different than the clinical psychology PsyD or PhD programs. Because they can technically become independent after their master's program and go through a certification, this does give them a different title. Instead of a licensed professional clinical counselor, they are a licensed educational psychologist, which means that the only place that they can really work is going to be in schools and educational systems. All right, guys, finally, we are at the end of the road. Let's go into the doctorate. So this is going to be 6 years plus. Now, here's what I will say. In the United States, you don't need a master's. A lot of people will go from the bachelor's degree. They'll completely skip this step and they'll go just straight into their doctorate. Not all schools are like that, so you definitely want to check in the websites to make sure what schools will allow you to go from bachelor's to a doctorate. But for the most part, you can skip this whole step if you want to. Now, of course, there are plenty of people with these degrees that end up eventually in their career applying for a PhD. So that is also perfectly normal as well. I do want to touch on the psychiatrist. Obviously, a psychiatrist is a mental health professional, but they do have a little bit of a different route than licensed psychologists. So a psychologist will probably not even take this route at all. They'll go from a bachelor's degree straight into med school, or they might get a master's in some type of health science related factor. But they'll go into med school, and then after med school, about 4 years, they'll go into a residency in psychiatry. After that residency in psychiatry, they'll finally go into their certification and they will become a psychiatrist. That will allow them to prescribe medication, which will probably be the biggest difference of all the mental health professionals, is that they will be able to prescribe medication. If they want to, they could do therapy, but most psychiatrists actually don't do therapy. Most psychiatrists will just focus on the medication side, especially because they tend to have a lot more clients and patients that they have to get through. And so doing therapy does not necessarily bode well for them if they're trying to see a lot of patients at the same time. And then finally, we have the PhD, the PsyD, and the ED. Now, here's the thing about these doctoral programs, guys. As I mentioned before, you can get a clinical psychology degree, PhD, or PsyD, and those things are equivalent. They're exactly the same. You will then go into your internship, which is usually one year, and then that'll be about 3,000 hours. And then from there, you can become licensed. You can take your licensure exam, and you can become a licensed psychologist. All right, guys. So that is from the beginning to the end. There's a lot of ways to use psychology. There's a lot of different ways to become a therapist. I would definitely check in with your state and its regulations on what it has with master's level therapists, whether it's an LCSW, whether it's an LMFT. I would also look online. I would make sure to do your homework in terms of what you can do in each step, whether it's with an associate's degree, a bachelor's degree, a master's degree, or a doctoral degree. So hopefully all of that makes sense. If you guys have any questions, definitely put it down in the comment section below. But with that, if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel, like this video, and I will see you guys in the next video.